Hello and welcome to this edition of Northwest Newsweek. A 64-year-old man employed by a contractor to the Lac des Îles mine has been killed in an industrial accident. The fatal injuries were sustained while the man was working underground. The palladium mine, operated by Impala Canada, was fully reopened this week for the first time since shutting down due to a COVID-19 outbreak. Avery McRae has details.
The tragic incident at the newly reopened mine occurred Wednesday mid-afternoon.
Yesterday after 3 o'clock, we responded to assist paramedics with a mine incident at the Impala mine on Highway 527. Information was that the male was injured underground, subsequently succumbed to his injuries.
The victim has been identified as 64-year-old Edward Gallant from Dunlop, New Brunswick, an employee with SCR Mining and Tunneling based out of Sudbury. The Ministry of Labour says Gallant was injured in a run of muck, which is an uncontrolled flow of blasted rock. Nearby workers and mine rescue crews responded to the scene. Gallant was transported off-site by Superior North EMS, but he was soon pronounced deceased. Operations in that part of the mine have been suspended and the area has been secured. Impala Canada, the Regional Coroner's Office, and the Ministry are all investigating the tragic incident with help from the OPP.
Just basic forensic information, fact gathering, photographs, video probably is all we have right now.
The Ministry of Labour will also be sending an inspector and engineer to inspect the scene. Impala Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Communications Aaron Satterthwaite released a statement stating, "We are deeply saddened by the most unfortunate accident. Nothing is more important than the health and safety of everyone at Lac des Îles. We extend our deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of the deceased." Satterthwaite also noted that grief counseling is available for both employees and contractors. Avery McRae, TBT News.
The drama continues in Emo following a decision by council Tuesday evening to not declare June as Pride Month. A 3-2 split against the declaration 2 weeks ago was met with anger and a petition demanding council revisit and pass the motion, saying it falls under human rights laws. Adam Riley reports.
Council in Emo has once again turned down a motion to declare June Pride Month. It came after a petition launched by the area's Pride organization garnered almost 2,000 signatures to have council reconsider the motion, which was narrowly voted down on May 12th. Like the previous meeting, there were several contentious interactions on the subject between members of council.
By refusing to support Pride Month, we are legitimizing the bigoted homophobes in our community, who, based on some of the comments I've seen on social media, might actually think that these kind of behaviors and actions are okay.
Dunn also got into a tense interaction with Mayor Harold McQuaker after the mayor brought into question the number of actual Emo residents who had signed the petition.
When you have 29 from our municipality against our sign at the west end of town says 1,400, what does that tell you?
It says that I have 29 members of my community who are very concerned about the safety of kids in our community.
In a release, Borderland Pride says the number of Emo residents who signed the petition is actually over 70. However, co-chair Douglas Judson says the petition and the declaration goes beyond simply numbers.
We're not talking about a public policy issue that is a majoritarian exercise. We are talking about minority rights. We set principles and law and policy to protect minority rights so that they do not become completely befuddled by ham-fisted decisions of councils like this.
Judson also took issue with this statement by Councillor Harold Bovin, who also voted against the motion.
Look at what has happened in our community. I'm now of the feeling that it's not the proper role of a municipal government to have special days regardless who's requested.
That's like the kind of governance you saw in like the Jim Crow South. Like in Montgomery, Alabama, when they decided when they were told by the courts they had to integrate their parks, they closed all the public parks, filled the swimming pools with dirt, and sold off the zoo animals. Does that really seem like a good approach to supporting your community?
Judson says Borderland Pride has reached out to a prominent Canadian human rights lawyer, and the organization will have more to say about the exact steps that will be taken in the coming days or weeks. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Canadian Pacific Railway had to deal with a major derailment just west of Ignace. Close to 50 grain cars went off the tracks Monday afternoon. Ignace Mayor Penny Lucas says CP Rail officials contacted her Monday night to provide details and told her no one was hurt and that no dangerous goods were spilled. CP crews worked to remove the cars and get the tracks repaired, and rail traffic was back moving by Tuesday night. Officials with CP say they're continuing to investigate the cause. With just one active COVID-19 case in the region and no new cases for an entire week, Dr. Stuart Kennedy is changing his tune on how Ontario should be reopened. The local COVID incident manager is now asking the Ford government to grant Thunder Bay special status to open at a faster pace than other parts of the province. Michael Mahorovich reports.
One active case in the community, we should be given, some consideration for some special status that we can begin opening some businesses earlier than Toronto.
With COVID-19 community spread contained, Dr. Stuart Kennedy has shifted his thinking and wants reopenings to happen faster in northwestern Ontario. With just one active case in the region, Kennedy says that in all likelihood the region will be down to 0 cases in the next few days.
Our prevalence rate for conversion to positivity is 0.9%. The rest of the province is 4.2%. So we've proven that we can actually do our sort of a due diligence and take those precautions. So I will assume the community will continue to take their precautions, but they should actually be given the opportunity to practice, their coughing into their sleeve, they keep their physical distancing, washing their hands, and they proved it because our results are good.
Kennedy may have support in the community, with Mayor Bill Morrow saying today that although Premier Doug Ford isn't entertaining regional openings at this time, discussions are ongoing with Medical Officer of Health Dr. Janet DeMille to see if it's potentially possible, depending on local conditions. Kennedy added that as the situation surrounding COVID-19 has improved throughout the region, it's given the hospital the opportunity to increase some of its services. Starting on Monday, pending provincial approval, it will begin increasing elective surgeries by 25% and increasing scan capacity as they have over 3,000 scans pending. Michael Mahorovich, TBT News.
COVID-19 testing in the Rainy River District should be on the rise in the near future. Officials from Riverside Healthcare agree with Premier Doug Ford's recent statement, pleading for more people to get a test and want to grow on the nearly 1,000 tests they've already completed. The organization announced that drive-through testing done in May will continue through the summer months, and assessment centers in Fort Frances and Rainy River have expanded criteria for who can be tested. Anyone who is symptomatic, in addition to those that are asymptomatic but are concerned about exposure to potential or known cases. Also, those who are asymptomatic but have a risk of exposure, like essential workers. An appointment with Riverside will need to be made prior to testing, with no one being turned down. The final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was released close to a year ago. But now Indigenous groups across the country are sounding the alarm as a national action plan stemming from the report's findings appears to be delayed. The inquiry detailed the daily situation and circumstances that many Indigenous females face, which can lead to disappearances or deaths. The final report was issued on June 3rd of 2019, with many, including NAN Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, expecting the National Action Plan to be released around its first anniversary. Fiddler expressed disappointment with the situation, saying the report was shelved just like we feared. Local MP Patty Haidu helped oversee the hearings when she was the Minister for the Status of Women. She's no longer a part of the discussions on the action plan, but says it's likely been held up as her government awaits input from proper groups who deserve to be heard on the matter.
The national report of that sort of magnitude, I would want to make sure that people who needed to have a voice in whether or not they approved of the report, it captured what they felt needed to be in the report. I wouldn't want to release it piecemeal and not be certain that people had had an opportunity to say their piece, because ultimately at the end of the day, if you do that, then you're assuming that you have consent.
The final report had 231 calls for justice, including reform of policing and the justice system, the elimination of gender discrimination, and changes to the Indigenous child welfare system. Fidler says he will be keeping a close eye on the federal government as they await the National Action Plan and make sure the plan is done right. When we come back, a fishing trip north of Kenora gives an area guide a lifetime ticket for bragging rights. A quiet day on the lake in northwestern Ontario is how one Kenora resident will start to describe the catch of a lifetime. Earlier this month, Cole Forsyth managed to catch a fish whose species origin can be traced back to when dinosaurs ruled the earth. Adam Riley has the story.
Definitely something you can only dream of.
Cole Forsyth has been fishing on lakes and rivers since he was old enough to hold a fishing rod. On May 21st, he ventured out onto nearby Black Sturgeon Lake north of Kenora for an evening bass fishing trip. As he was trolling towards a usual bass hotspot, he noticed a nibble on his line.
First inclination was, oh, this is a big one. This is that 6-pounder kind of that I was looking for, because I mean there's big fish in this lake, and no, head comes up a little bit. I'm like, that's not a largemouth.
Forsyth had in fact hooked himself a 7-foot-long sturgeon, a species of fish that dates back to the Triassic period, some 245 to 208 million years ago. He says he spent almost 30 minutes reeling in the fish before he was able to fully see its size.
The front deck of our boat is about 7 feet, and I was standing at the front, and its head's by the trolling motor, and I was kind of looking back down the side of the boat, and I'd say this thing's big.
Forsyth says he knew his catch's place was back in the water and released it after taking some photos. He is still in shock of the fish, which is estimated to be over 200 pounds and over 100 years in age. And he can only wonder in awe at the history behind it.
To be able to kind of have a real-life dinosaur, something with that much history, it's seen so much, I'm sure. Like, can only imagine all the 5+ pound fish it's seen. To be able to just share a moment with it, I mean, maybe not by the fish's will, but for the little bit of time I had, is just something special.
A fishing guide by trade, Forsyth is feeling the effects of the current COVID-19 pandemic, but he knows when he starts booking clients again, he will have one heck of a fishing story to tell. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Earlier this month, we reported that the annual Terrace Bay Drag Fest was still a go. However, that may no longer be the case. Terrace Bay's Municipal Emergency Control Group has canceled a test and tune set to take place next month, saying it's for the safety of the community. The test and tunes are primarily attended by drag racers and mechanics and have no spectator component. Superior Classic Car Club President Mark Houston says the events also serve as a fundraiser for the Drag Fest itself, which is scheduled to take place on the August long weekend. A final decision on whether or not the 22nd annual Terrace Bay Drag Races will be held is expected to be made in the near future. Now that the Kanagami Road project has been completed, the Township of Terrace Bay is looking forward to moving ahead with its next major road project. Mill Road, which connects Highway 17 to the A.V. Burla Mill, sees some heavy traffic and over time has become worn down. However, unlike the Kanagami Road project, which included underground infrastructure work, Mayor Jody Davis says the project is just a surface repaving. He adds the price tag for the project is an estimated $1.8 million, with a majority of the cost being covered by the federal and provincial governments.
So we've been very fortunate that the town's portion is about 6%. So it's a good project for us, and we're looking forward to moving forward now that construction is being promoted and allowed through this COVID period. And yes, we hope to have that done by this fall.
Davis says there's some concern over the availability of a contractor who would be able to do the work, not only due to COVID-19, but also with many projects in the region and getting the green light. A long overdue project deemed as essential during the pandemic is underway in Fort Frances. Construction is underway on Scott Street as crews perform an overhaul of infrastructure both above and below the street. It's part of a multi-million-dollar project that was funded by the provincial government through the Connecting Link Fund. Mayor June Call says due to COVID-19, there isn't as much traffic on the street as there would be during a normal year, and assurances have been given to prevent the possibility of an outbreak on the job site.
It's a good time to do it because people basically aren't going too far from their yards at all. We have assurance that our construction company will definitely make sure that they keep obeying the rules about safe distancing and so on. So it might be a little bit difficult for them at times, but the rules are the rules, so they'll follow them for sure.
Call says most of the work will be completed by October or November, and crews will return to put the finishing touches on the top layer of asphalt in the spring. She's also hopeful that funding applications for other high-priority road projects in the community will also be successful. Construction of Nexbridge's east-west tie is starting to resume. The 230 kilovolt bulk power transmission line started initial construction last year. At the beginning of the pandemic, its two camps, one in Marathon and one near Nipigon, were shuttered to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But since the project was deemed essential, work has continued in various areas along the 450-kilometer-long route. Project Director Jennifer Tidmarsh says the Nipigon camp, located on the territory of the Red Rock Indian Band, will remain closed as the community limited access to the territory due to the virus. However, once access to the camp resumes, operations will be different.
Made some preparations to try and open it, but the community is not comfortable with us moving the camp in. We've had a lot of conversations with them about our protocols. So really, camps going forward are now, what we've done is we've changed the shifting for workers. So the workers actually have 8 weeks on and 2 weeks off where they go back to where they're from. So 8 weeks, and those camps don't have any common areas in them anymore. So there's no gyms, there's no recreation areas. People go from work back to the camp and into their rooms.
Tidmarsh says after observing how the Lac des Îles mine handled its outbreak of the virus, the company has ordered its own COVID-19 testing kits, and employees will be monitored for their health. Should a presumptive case arise, the employee would be quarantined, and if the test comes back positive, the camp would be shut down. Coming up after the break, a show of support for frontline workers in Dryden breathes life back into residential streets that have been empty since the beginning of the pandemic. Part of the measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is social distancing. The inability to visit friends, embrace loved ones, or even spend time in a group setting can take its toll. For several weeks now, one Dryden resident has been setting up speakers and holding social distancing block parties, allowing neighbors to gather in their yards, listen to music, and cheer on frontline workers. Adam Riley has the story.
You've seen the videos in large cities across the country, people gathering on their balconies or front porches, cheering on frontline workers at shift change. And while the show might be smaller in Dryden, the sentiment is still there. Every evening from 7:30 to 7:45, Michael Patey has been blasting some feel-good tunes into the neighborhood. And with each passing day, the turnout has only grown in popularity.
First night we got about 28 people, and our best has been 70, believe it or not. So a lot of children are joining in, and we get to meet our neighbors, of course, our seniors and things like that. They come to the end of the driveway, give a little wave, and it lets us know, they're okay.
Patey says he was inspired by similar showings of support in another neighborhood and wanted to do the same. He says it has created a sense of normalcy in the neighborhood as life briefly flows back into the streets, with families riding bikes and waving flags, which he fully encourages, to a degree.
The more the merrier, as long as they're doing their distancing, of course, social distancing. But we've had some ATV four-wheelers. We've even had gentlemen come out on his riding lawnmower. We've had, like you say, the Shriner cars have come out, and we invite the children to use the car and some of the parents to jump in and do about. It's just really nice to see the community activity.
Some of Patey's neighbors include first responders and frontline workers, and even members of Patey's own family are on the front lines of the COVID-19 battle. And despite many song requests like the crowd favorite Chicken Dance, Patey makes sure to devote part of the evening to those workers and ends every show with the national anthem.
I'm very impressed. Everybody removes their headwear. Everybody stands at the edge of the road and they cheer in on O Canada.
Patey says he intends to continue holding these block parties, rain or shine, for as long as he can. Adam Riley, TBT News.
As announced earlier this month, students in schools across the province will not be going back to class for the rest of the school year. Since March, classrooms have been empty and students have been learning through online platforms. Superior Greenstone School Board Director of Education, Nicole Morden-Cormier, says she welcomes the decision by the province to hold off on bringing students back into the class until September. She believes this will give both the province and school boards the time needed to formulate what classes will look like in the fall, which she says will look very, very different.
We're having to rethink, and so school is not going to look the same when we return in September as it did before we left in March. We are looking right now at all of the classroom compositions. Many of our classrooms have tables. We use a lot of time on the carpet, and so those physical, logistical pieces are where our minds are also going as a school board.
Morden-Cormier says, like other school boards, the collection of student items left in lockers and cubbies prior to the March break are being coordinated to limit contact. The Regional Food Bank and the Thunder Bay Salvation Army teamed up for another food distribution event at the CLE grounds on Friday. The RFDA is also keeping food flowing to other communities across the region between Marathon and the Manitoba border. The hamper handouts in Thunder Bay had seen long lineups back in April, but the two organizations now have a better rounded system that has significantly sped things up. It's just one of the unique challenges they've been facing throughout the pandemic. The RFDA has been the central component in ensuring towns across the region get the food that they need for the hungry and, of course, the less fortunate.
We have a lot of members across the region, and those members are entitled to have the same Feed Ontario hampers, and so we share that. And so those adjustments have been made. So we've been shipping hampers, but as well as we are shipping to the regional members, the potatoes and all those bulk foods. But the great news for us is the relationship we've made with a lot of the First Nations. We've had, over the last couple of years, we've had a growing relationship with some communities directly.
2 more hamper pickups are planned for the CLE grounds on June 12th and 26th, at which point the RFDA and the Salvation Army will meet with their members to decide what the next steps should be. That's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.